It started with a trip I didn't plan to take. My son Matthew had been begging to go out, not to a playground with jungle gyms and splash pads, just out. It was one of those golden Saturday afternoons in late spring, the kind that makes the air smell like possibility. The sun wasn't too hot, the breeze was gentle, and the cicadas hadn't started their annual concert yet. I remembered a park I hadn't thought about in years, Wellington Park, tucked away behind the old library in the neighborhood I grew up in. It was quiet, overlooked, the kind of place time seemed to forget. So we went. The second I stepped into the park, something shifted inside me. The trees were taller now. The sandbox was gone. But one thing hadn't changed, not completely. The bench. The same concrete and wood bench that sat crooked under a chestnut tree near the path's curve. The paint was chipped, moss clung to its legs, and part of one slat had cracked clean through. But I recognized it instantly. And I froze. Matthew was already skipping ahead, chasing a butterfly with his hoodie tied around his waist, humming something tuneless. But I stood there, staring at that bench like it had just whispered my name. That bench. It was where I used to sit with my father every Sunday afternoon from the time I was about 5 to maybe 12. We'd walk to the corner store, each get an ice cream. He always had butter pecan. I'd change my mind every week, and then we'd come to this bench. And we'd sit. That's it. Sometimes we'd talk. Usually we didn't. He'd watch the birds. I'd swing my legs. Silence was never awkward. It was just what we did. Until we didn't. I couldn't remember exactly when the tradition stopped. Sometime during middle school, I guess. He got busier. I got older. Then came the teenage years, the quiet dinner tables, the awkward car rides, and the distance that grew between us like fog, thick, stubborn, and unspoken. He passed away last fall. Heart failure. Quiet. Sudden. I was out of town on a work trip. He'd left a voicemail the day before. No rush, just call when you have a minute. I didn't call. And when I stood over his casket days later, all I could think about was how not sad I felt. Not because I didn't love him, but because I wasn't sure if he ever really knew me, or if I ever really knew him. And then months later, here I was, standing in front of that old bench again. I sat down slowly. It creaked under my weight, the wood groaning in protest. My fingers traced the splintered edge, and memories I didn't even know I still had started flooding back. The way he used to hum under his breath. How he always checked if the seat was warm before I sat. How he never said, "I love you," but always split the last bite of his ice cream with me. "Dad, what are you doing?" Matthew's voice snapped me back. He was standing in front of me, cheeks red from running, eyes curious. "Just remembering," I said. He tilted his head. "This bench looks like it's about to collapse." I laughed, the sound surprising even me. "It's been through a lot." He plopped down next to me. "Are we going to sit here or do something?" "We're doing something," I said, putting my arm around him. "We're being still." He gave me a look only a 10-year-old can give, a perfect mix of confusion, suspicion, and acceptance. We sat there in silence. For 2 minutes. Then 3. Then 5. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I wasn't too late. I went back to the bench the following weekend. Alone this time. Matthew had a sleepover, and my wife was visiting her sister. I told myself I was just going to walk, maybe get some air. But my feet had other plans, and somehow, I ended up at the same spot, same bench, same tree humming in the breeze. I sat again. This time, I let myself look. I studied every inch of that bench like it held a secret code. I noticed the initials carved into the back. E+R, Go Wildcats, Class of '92. Ghosts of Other Lives. And then near the bottom, on the inside of the wooden leg, almost hidden by moss and time, I saw it, carved lightly, barely visible unless you were looking for it. For all the Sundays that didn't need words. I just stared. A lump rose in my throat, so suddenly I had to blink hard. My father's pocket knife had a distinct tip. He'd carved his initials into our shed with it once when I was 7. The shape of the letters. I knew that carving. He'd left it there. A message. Not for the world. For me. All those Sundays. All that silence. It wasn't absence. It wasn't indifference. It was presence. Love in its quietest form. He had been talking to me all along. I just hadn't known how to listen. I ran my fingers over the carving, and for the first time since he passed, I let the tears come. No drama. No breaking down. Just silent, steady tears like rain after a long drought. I don't know how long I sat there, but when I finally stood up, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Lighter. Not because the grief was gone, but because now it made sense. Before I left, I took out my phone and snapped a photo of the carving. Then I texted my son, "Hey bud, tomorrow, same bench. Ice cream's on me." Sunday came. Warm, quiet, blue-skied. I didn't tell Matthew much, just that we were going back to Wellington Park, and yes, he could get ice cream on the way. He lit up like I'd handed him a winning lottery ticket. He chose mint chip. I went with butter pecan. I hadn't had butter pecan since I was 12. The moment I tasted it, I nearly choked on the nostalgia. It was sweet, creamy, with that distinct nutty undertone, and somehow, it brought my father's presence back more vividly than anything else ever had. Matthew walked beside me, licking his cone and skipping over sidewalk cracks like they were lava. When we reached the bench, he hesitated. "That one again?" "Yep. It's kind of gross," he said, eyeing the mossy side. "Can't we sit somewhere cleaner?" I smiled. "It's not gross. It's classic." He gave me a side glance, but sat anyway. We sat for a while, quietly eating our ice cream. Birds chirped overhead. A dog barked in the distance. The wind rustled the trees in that way that almost sounds like whispers. Matthew shifted. "So, what now?" I shrugged. "Now we just sit." He gave me a suspicious look. "That's it. That's it." He sighed. Loudly. With dramatic flair only a 10-year-old can produce. "Boring." I didn't say anything. A minute passed. Then another. I could see him fidgeting, fingers tapping his knee, eyes scanning for distractions. Finally he muttered, "Why are we even doing this?" I looked at him. Because this was something I used to do with my dad. Every Sunday. He blinked. "This exact bench?" "Yep." "What did you talk about?" "Not much," I said. "Sometimes nothing at all." He frowned. "That's weird." I chuckled. "Maybe. But it meant something. I didn't get it back then. But now." I think it was his way of showing up. Being there. He didn't say anything for a while. Then, "You miss him?" I nodded. "Every day." He looked down at his shoes. "I don't really remember him." "You were just a baby," I said softly. "But he held you once. You fell asleep in his arms." Matthew was quiet. Then he scooted closer to me and rested his head against my arm. We stayed like that for a while, and for the first time, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt full, full of presence, full of history, full of something I couldn't name, but deeply needed. Before we left, I told him, "Hey, want to know a secret?" He perked up. I pointed to the carving beneath the bench. He crouched, squinting. "What's it say?" I read it aloud. "For all the Sundays that didn't need words." "Grandpa wrote that?" "Yeah, a long time ago." Matthew was quiet for a beat. Then he smiled. "That's kinda cool." We walked home, sticky hands, empty cones and all. That night, just before bed, he poked his head into my room. "Hey, Dad." "Yeah. Can we go next Sunday, too?" I nodded. "Absolutely." He grinned, gave me a thumbs up and disappeared. And just like that, the bench wasn't just part of my past anymore. It had become part of our present. Over the next few weeks, we returned every Sunday. Same bench, same silence, same rhythm. Sometimes we brought books, sometimes snacks. Sometimes we just sat and watched squirrels do their chaotic squirrel things. Other times we talked about school, about weird dreams, about whether cats were secretly planning world domination. But always we were there, together. One Sunday, Matthew brought a rag and a bottle of cleaner. "Bench needs a bath," he said seriously. I laughed, but let him go for it. We scrubbed off the moss, polished the slats as best we could, and even picked up some trash around the area. It wasn't perfect, but it looked better, like someone cared. When we finished, I knelt by the wood and traced my father's old carving again. Then I asked Matthew, "Want to add something?" His eyes lit up. "Can I?" I handed him my pocket knife, careful to guide his hands. Together, we etched the new line just beneath the old one, careful not to erase what came before. For anyone who knows love doesn't always need words. He leaned back and read it aloud. "Nice. You wrote that," I said. He smiled. "Yeah, but you helped." Weeks turned into months. Seasons shifted. Leaves turned gold, then brown, then disappeared. The bench stood steady through it all, like a quiet witness to our little tradition. One day, I brought my own dad's photo in my wallet and set it on the bench between us. Matthew noticed. "Is that Grandpa?" "Yeah," I said, brushing dust from the corner. "Thought he might want to sit with us." We both looked at the photo. "Think he'd like that we're here?" I swallowed hard. "I think he'd love it." That evening, as we packed up to go, Matthew said something I'll never forget. "Hey, Dad." "Yeah. When I'm your age. Think I'll still remember this?" I smiled. "If I've done my job right. You won't just remember. You'll bring someone here." He looked at the bench, then at me. "I think I will." We walked home slowly, hand in hand. And though the bench stayed behind, a part of it came with us. Not the wood, not the carvings, but what it stood for. Love, legacy, presence. The kind of family moment that doesn't need to go viral to matter. It just needs to be real. Sometimes we spend so much time waiting for the perfect words, those big cinematic moments where everything is said and everything makes sense. But real family connection? It often lives in the quiet, in the ordinary, in a bench, an ice cream cone, a shared silence under a tree. My father never said much, and for years I mistook that silence for absence. But now I know, his presence was the loudest thing in the world. I just wasn't listening the right way. If there's someone in your life you've drifted from, maybe a parent, a child, or even a sibling, maybe you don't need the perfect conversation. Maybe you just need to sit beside them and let the silence do what words sometimes can't.